It all began on a quiet summer afternoon in Delhi, a day that seemed so ordinary yet carried within it a secret storm that would shatter lives forever. Imagine this: an army officer returns home from duty, expecting to see his wife waiting for him, but instead he steps into a nightmare where silence answers his calls. Hours later, her body is discovered on a busy road, mutilated and crushed, staged to look like an accident. What happened in those missing hours? Who wanted her dead? And why would someone turn such cold brutality into a twisted crime of passion? This is the haunting tale of Major Shailja Dwivedi's last day on Earth, a story where love, obsession, and betrayal collide in the most chilling way. On June 23, 2018, Major Amit Dwivedi, an army officer posted in Delhi with the engineering wing, returned to his government quarters around 2:00 p.m. The quarters were not far from his office, barely a 20-minute drive. He expected to see his wife, Shailja, at home, perhaps resting after her routine hospital visit. Instead, he was greeted only by his 6-year-old son, Ayan. When Amit asked where his mother was, the boy innocently replied that she had gone to the army base hospital but had not yet returned. At first, Amit thought little of it. After all, Shailja had been undergoing treatment for an ankle injury, and her therapy sessions sometimes stretched longer than expected. But as minutes turned into an hour, a sense of unease began creeping in. Amit recalled that earlier, Shailja had told him she would be undergoing an MRI that day. That was why she had not accompanied him in the morning. Instead, she had taken a driver to the hospital herself. Normally, she would return home shortly after treatment, calling her driver back to pick her up. Yet now her phone was switched off, and there was no word from her. Trying to ease his worry, the household orderly mentioned that Shailja had phoned earlier, saying she might be delayed. Believing it was just a matter of medical reports taking longer, Amit tried to stay calm. He even sat down with his son for lunch, convincing himself that soon his wife would walk through the door. But time moved on, and still there was nothing. Around 3:00 p.m., Amit called the hospital to check if his wife had been seen for her MRI. The answer stunned him. Shailja had not arrived for any scan. Panic rushed in like a cold wave. How could that be? Their driver had confirmed he dropped her at the hospital gates. Somewhere between the hospital and home, she had vanished. Amit immediately informed his army unit. Fellow officers rushed to his quarters, and together they tried calling her phone again and again. But each attempt ended the same. The line was dead. Soon, everyone agreed it was time to inform the police. That very afternoon, at nearly the same time Amit was making frantic calls, the police control room at Narayana police station received a report. An auto rickshaw driver named Deepak claimed a woman had been struck by a car near Brar Square, close to a metro station. Inspector Sunil Chauhan and his team rushed to the scene. What they found was horrifying. A woman's lifeless body lay on the road, brutally crushed. Blood stained the pavement, and tire marks circled her corpse as though a vehicle had run over her multiple times. This did not look like an ordinary accident. It looked deliberate, as if someone had wanted to erase her from existence. Closer examination revealed something even more sinister. Around the woman's neck was a deep gash, a wound too precise to be caused by a car accident. It was the mark of a sharp blade. Inspector Sunil Chauhan and his team began combing through her life, searching for anything unusual. The first lead came from her mobile phone records. Within hours, analysts had uncovered something startling. In the last 3 months, Shailja had received nearly 6,000 calls from one particular number. 6,000 calls, far too many to be casual and far too personal to be business-related. On the day of her death, the same number had called her early in the morning. When the police showed the number to Major Amit, he stiffened. It belonged to none other than his former friend, Major Nikhil Handa. The revelation unsettled Amit deeply. Once he had welcomed Handa into his home, even introduced him to his wife. But over time, Amit had grown wary. Handa had been paying too much attention to Shailja, calling her frequently and even making advances that crossed the line of friendship. Amit had eventually asked Shailja to cut ties with him, and the couple had distanced themselves. Now, seeing his name resurface in connection with thousands of calls, Amit could no longer deny what his instincts had been warning him. Handa was obsessed with his wife. The police now had a name, but they needed more than suspicion. They turned to the army base hospital, retracing Shailja's last known steps. Doctors confirmed that she had indeed come to the hospital that morning, but she left without completing her physiotherapy session. Why would she leave without treatment? Surveillance cameras gave the answer. At around 11 o'clock a.m., Shailja was seen stepping into a white Honda City and driving away. The car was traced to a retired army colonel, Handa's father. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. Investigators rushed to Saket, where Handa's family lived. His father admitted the car was registered in his name but mostly used by his son Nikhil. He also revealed an other detail. Nikhil's young son had been admitted to the base hospital, and his wife Nalini spent most of her time there. Nikhil often came and went under the pretext of visiting his child. The timeline fit perfectly. Shailja was last seen getting into Handa's car. Shortly afterward, her body was discovered near Brar Square. When police spoke to Nalini, Handa's wife, she confirmed seeing him at the hospital that morning. He had arrived around 10 o'clock a.m., stayed briefly, and then left. He returned later in the afternoon, but only for a short while. After that, there was no sign of him. Nalini seemed unaware of what her husband had been up to, but her words added another nail in the coffin. Handa had both the opportunity and the proximity to commit the crime. By the evening of June 23rd, Delhi police were convinced they had their suspect. The problem was, Handa had vanished. His phone was switched off, and none of his colleagues or family knew his whereabouts. Senior Officer DCP Vijay Kumar immediately formed multiple teams to hunt him down. Surveillance units tracked his movements through brief signals when he switched on his phone. Around midnight, his location pinged near Akshardham Temple. The next morning, another ping placed him near Meerut. Police teams were dispatched immediately, chasing the faint digital trail of a man on the run. But while the police searched for him, questions swirled about who this man really was. To the outside world, Major Nikhil Handa was an army officer, a husband, a father of two. But beneath the uniform lay a man tormented by obsession. His story with Shailja had not begun with murder. It had begun years earlier on Facebook. Back in 2015, Handa had created multiple social media profiles pretending to be a businessman on one and an army officer on another. Through these accounts, he connected with women, often seeking out the modern, glamorous personalities he craved but could not find at home. It was through Facebook that he first met Shailja. She had been pursuing modeling and personality development courses, eager to carve out her own identity beyond being just a wife and mother. On social media, she often interacted with new people, and that was how Handa entered her life. Initially, both concealed their truths. Shailja claimed she was the wife of a banker, while Handa pretended to be a businessman. When the truth emerged, that both were connected to the army, they grew closer. Conversations moved from chats to calls, from casual banter to daily exchanges. For months, their virtual connection grew, until finally, they met in person. Their first meeting was like a spark to dry wood. Handa, already fascinated by Shailja's confidence and charm, was smitten. He confessed his feelings early, but Shailja kept the boundaries clear. To her, he was just a friend, nothing more. But for Handa, her rejection only intensified his obsession. He began following her, calling her incessantly, inserting himself into her life whenever he could. When he discovered that she and her family were moving to Delhi for a Meet's training assignment, he saw it as a golden opportunity. Handa even manipulated his own postings, trying to remain geographically close to Shailja. At one point, he moved to Dimapur, where Amit and Shailja had been living, and went so far as to rent a house near theirs. He attended family events, even mingled with Amit, hiding his obsession under the mask of friendship. But in truth, every interaction fueled his desire for Shailja to reciprocate his feelings. When Amit noticed the closeness and asked his wife to distance herself, Shailja complied. She cut down on calls and avoided private meetings, but Handa could not accept no. To him, Shailja was not just a friend, she was an obsession, a fixation he was willing to risk everything for. His marriage to Nalini faded into the background. His responsibilities as a father became secondary. In his mind, he was fighting for a love story that existed only in his imagination. Friends who once knew him as a disciplined officer could hardly recognize the man who now spent hours scheming, calling, and begging for Shailja's attention. By the time June 2018 arrived, Handa's obsession had boiled over into dangerous desperation. He had pleaded with Shailja countless times. He had even threatened to leave his wife for her, but Shailja stood firm. She was clear. She did not love him, and she never would. For her, the boundaries of friendship were sacred, and she valued her marriage and family. But Handa took her rejection not as a decision, but as a challenge, and in his distorted mind, if he could not have her, no one could. The police pursuing him across Delhi and Uttar Pradesh did not yet know the full story of his obsession. But every lead they followed, every call record they examined, every camera they checked, all roads led to one truth. Major Nikhil Handa was not just a suspect. He was the man who had lured Shailja into his car, the man who had ended her life in a violent storm of rage and jealousy. The chase was closing in, and soon his mask of denial would be ripped away. But as investigators drew closer, one haunting question began to rise. What exactly happened in those final moments inside that white Honda city? What words were exchanged? What desperate pleas were made? And what final decision turned a military officer into a cold-blooded killer? The answers were waiting, and Part 3 would reveal the chilling climax. As the night of June 23rd faded into June 24th, police teams fanned out across highways and toll plazas, their eyes peeled for a man who was both a fugitive and a soldier. Major Nikhil Handa had gone underground, but he could not erase the digital footprints of his phone. Surveillance experts tracked his movements like a hunter following a wounded animal. Each time he powered on his mobile, even for a minute, the trail grew warmer. At dawn, the signal placed him near Meerut. By noon, he was spotted at the Daurala toll plaza. The chase had ended. Delhi police swooped in, surrounding the Honda city. Inside, they found Handa, disheveled, restless, and carrying secrets darker than the bloodstains still clinging to his car tires. The vehicle itself was a crime scene on wheels. When investigators searched the trunk and seats, they found traces of blood and a knife tucked away. The tires bore faint but undeniable marks of gore. It was the smoking gun the police needed. Handa, however, tried to mask his guilt with calm denial. At the police station, seated across from officers Walius, Ho knew the truth. He claimed innocence. He insisted he had nothing to do with Shailja's death. When questioned about the bloodstains, he casually replied that he had once hit a stray dog with his car. His lies might have sounded plausible to a stranger, but not to seasoned investigators armed with CCTV footage, call records, and forensic evidence. For hours, Handa resisted. He clung to his version of events, denying everything, portraying himself as a victim of unfortunate coincidences. But police officers are trained to read cracks in a person's armor. They pressed harder, showing him the footage of Shailja entering his car at the hospital gate. They showed him the phone logs, thousands of calls made to her, some lasting hours. They reminded him of his presence at the morgue, lurking near Amit, too afraid to confront the reality of his crime. Slowly his composure crumbled, his voice faltered, his eyes flickered, and finally his mask collapsed. When the confession came, it was not loud but chilling in its simplicity. Handa admitted he had killed Shailja. He confessed that his obsession for her had consumed him, twisting love into rage. For years he had chased a dream of being with her, convincing himself that she would one day choose him. But when she rejected him again on that fatal morning, his fragile control snapped. In a surge of anger, he pulled out a surgical blade he had been carrying. As the car rolled down the relatively deserted Brar Square stretch, he slashed her throat before she could even scream for help. Blood filled the car. Panic filled his mind. To erase the evidence, he shoved her body onto the road and crushed her with the car again and again, hoping the world would believe it was an accident. Even as he described the killing, Handa did not seem fully aware of the horror of his actions. He spoke like a man blinded by passion, convinced that his crime was born from love. But to the police and to the grieving family, it was nothing more than cold-blooded murder, a selfish act by a man who could not accept rejection. The confession opened floodgates of memories from Shailja's life, painting a tragic contrast. She had been a woman of grace, intelligence, and ambition. Once a lecturer, later a model, and always a devoted wife and mother, she had sought to carve her own identity, appearing on magazine covers and working with NGOs. She had embraced life with confidence and kindness, and yet, in the end, her light was snuffed out by someone who mistook obsession for love. As investigators pieced together the timeline, more disturbing details emerged. After the murder, Handa had tried to clean his car, washing away the blood but failing to scrub the truth. He had even visited his relatives, borrowing money, drinking beer with his brother and pretending as though nothing had happened. Behind his casual facade, however, lay a man unraveling. His attempt to flee to Meerut was not just a bid for escape. It was a desperate move to hide the car and perhaps destroy the last traces of his crime. But destiny had closed in, and the army major turned murderer found himself caged by the very system he once served. The courtroom later heard the full story. Prosecutors laid out every call, every message, every obsessive act that showed how Handa's so-called love was nothing more than possession. They argued that Shailja had respected boundaries, repeatedly turning him away, but he had refused to listen. In the end, the court recognized the crime for what it was: premeditated, brutal, and motivated by delusion. Handa was convicted, his once promising career reduced to ashes, his family left to bear the shame of his choices. His wife, Nalini, and his children became collateral damage in his downfall. For Amit and little Ayan, the loss was immeasurable. They had not only lost a wife and mother, but also a sense of security. Amit's tears at the morgue had been the first crack in his soldier's armor, but the pain would linger long after the headlines faded. Shailja's parents too grieved the daughter who had once made them proud with her achievements, only to be stolen away by cruelty masked as affection. In the larger sense, the case raised questions that extended beyond the individuals involved. How often does society mistake obsession for love? How many women endure relentless harassment cloaked in the language of romance before tragedy strikes? Shailja's death became a reminder that no must always mean no, and that boundaries once set must be respected. Obsession is not devotion, it is control, and when control slips, it destroys. The story closed with a lesson, but not without leaving scars. Major Nikhil Handa, once a man in uniform, had become an example of how unchecked desire can strip away honor, humanity, and reason. Shailja Dwivedi, once a rising star in modeling and a beloved mother, became a victim whose voice was silenced but whose story still echoes. It is a tale that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about love, obsession, and the darkness that hides in plain sight. And yet, even after the case ended, one question continues to haunt us all. How does a man sworn to protect his nation, a husband and father entrusted with duty, allow himself to descend into such madness for the sake of a one-sided love? Is obsession born of weakness, or is it a choice we make when we refuse to let go?